Hello, BookTube. We're going to continue on with the third bookcase, third shelf. This is the first part. Again, it's nautical, maritime histories type stuff. And we're going to start with Tropics Bound, Elizabeth's Sea Dogs on the Spanish Main by James C. Dean. Hopefully the light doesn't cause too much glare there. This volume is from the History Press. First published in 2010, the History Press. Appears to be a first edition. For the first time and long awaited, we have the view from the gun deck of the wide world that opened to the Elizabethans on the Spanish Main and among the islands of the Caribbean. The tang of salt air stings the story. So does fearsome reality. The diseases and storms that wreak havoc on sailors and ships alike, and more often than not ruin the ambitions of many a financier. With the sea power of Imperial Spain still dominant, England's private adventurers could singe the beards of the haughty Spaniards, but wherever possible still evaded Iberian naval firepower and the dreaded Inquisition. Tropics Bound, rich in documentary research, reveals in triumph and failure the lives of privateers who deserve to be remembered, of wealth acquired, of health forsaken, and of risks so often surprisingly achieved. So, our author, James C. Dean, is an emeritus professor of history and English and humanities, at the University of Wisconsin Parkside. He has taught maritime history and published numerous articles in nautical, literary, and historical journals. He's an experienced sailor and is the author of Sailing a Square Rigger. He lives on the Chesapeake Bay near Annapolis, and there he is. Oh, this is a beautifully illustrated book. I mean, look at these old charts. More. Very nicely produced book. I enjoyed it. So it's a good story, good history. And another history, the best way to do this, I guess this will work, is Journey to the Polar Sea, John Franklin. New introduction by James P. Delgado, and a 1908 introduction by Captain Scott, which is really neat. It's a paper bound. Brassey's Incorporated out of Dulles, Virginia. So the copyright for Brassey's is 2000. It's their first edition. Let me see. Captain R.F. Scott wrote an introduction in 1908. James P. Delgado wrote the one to this. This is how the pages are, and hopefully you can see that throughout. There's Franklin. And there's Captain Franklin. There's Lady Franklin. So even before he vanished in the Arctic in 1845, the tales of John Franklin's explorations were fascinating. Seeking the Northwest Passage, Franklin led an ill-fated journey from 1819 to 22 that ended in disaster. After successfully mapping part of the Arctic coast, his crew's supplies ran out. Over half of his men died, with the survivors living on lichen, bones, scrap of hides, and even their own boots as food sources, giving Franklin his famous nickname, which was the man who ate his own boots. Journey to the Polar Sea is Franklin's own account of the disastrous expedition, taken straight from his journal. This new edition reproduces the original 1908 edition, complete with the original introduction by Captain Robert Falcon Scott, who we all know led his own ill-fated expedition to the Arctic in 1910. It's only a few years after this. And adds a new introduction by James P. Delgado. The later discusses biographical information and new research, including an archaeological excavation of the site where Franklin and his men were rescued. Sumptuously illustrated and poignantly written, Journey to the Polar Sea is a classic tale of exploration and high drama, told from the point of view of the most famous and tragic British explorer ever to seek the Northwest Passage. Very, very much an enjoyable read. So next we have Mutiny on the Globe. This is the story of the fatal voyage of Samuel Comstock by Thomas Farrell Heffernan. End papers here with a helpful map. And here's our author. Samuel Comstock was born with a sense of destiny that is sometimes granted to great artists or leaders of men. In his case, it was a mark of Cain. Though he had vowed from childhood that he would do some great things, his only legacy was a reign of terror. He came from a family that had grown rich trading in whaling products, so it's no surprise that young Samuel Comstock, as wild and headstrong a youth as had ever been seen in the wars of Nantucket or New York, signed on to the whale ship Globe in 1822. What would have been surprising, had anyone known, were the contents of his sea chest, a diverse collection of seeds, tools, medical supplies, and weapons. Later, too late, his brother remembered that Samuel used to talk about establishing his own island kingdom in the South Seas. Of course, no one had taken him seriously. 2 years out of Nantucket on the voyage, Comstock put into action the plan he had long meditated. With the help of some roguish recent additions to the crew, he organized a mutiny and butchered the officers of the Globe in cold blood. By a strange twist of fate, the chief witness and chronicler of the mutiny was another of Samuel's brothers, young George, who neither participated in nor approved of the savage deed. George called Samuel a brother in flesh, but not in heart. So little did the older brother care whether his younger survived to see him home again. Within days of settling in the Mailai Atoll in the Marshall Islands, Samuel Comstock was murdered by his fellow mutineers. 6 innocent seamen, George among them, seized the Globe and escaped. Most of the rest were killed by natives. 2 survivors lived for 22 months, half prisoner and half adoptees of the natives, until they were rescued in a bold and dangerous maneuver by a landing party from the U.S. schooner Dolphin. So this is pretty frightening stuff. It's a disturbing tale, but an interesting part of history. This next one's this is the War of the Oceans, from Nelson at the Nile to Napoleon at Waterloo, by Roy Adkins and Leslie Adkins. This is a very good history. It's here you go. So it's Viking. First American edition, 2007, Viking Penguin. From its very first page, The War for All the Oceans is an adventure story, a superb account of the naval war that lasted from Napoleon's seizure of power in 1798 to the War of 1812 in the United States. Most naval histories stop at Nelson's death at the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805. Yet the Royal Navy took on almost every other nation that had a rival fleet: the French, the Spanish, Dutch, Danes, Russians, Turks, and Americans. Shipping routes all over the world were guarded to ensure that trade with Britain was not interrupted, and as Napoleon lost his empire, Britain formed solid imperial foundations, all because the British Navy gained control of the oceans. And this is that story. It's nicely illustrated. Very good book. I won't go through all these, but that's The War of All the Oceans by Roy Adkins and Leslie Adkins. This next one here is a fun one. The Pirate Hunter. Those you like pirates? It's a true story of Captain Kidd by Richard Zacks. Here's the end papers. It's copyright 2002 is the first edition. Looks to me like it's the third printing now. Give you an idea how it looks on the inside. Let's see if we get anything on here. Captain Kidd has gone down in history as America's most ruthless buccaneer. Fabulously rich, bearing dozens of treasure chests up and down the eastern seaboard. Over the centuries, novelists, relentless treasure hunters, and even historians have stoked his pirate legend. Robert Louis Stevenson, for one, placed Kidd's anchorage on Treasure Island. But it turns out that most everyone, even many respected scholars, have the story all wrong. Captain William Kidd was no career cutthroat. He was a tough, successful New York sea captain who was hired to chase pirates. In 1696, he set out on a near impossible mission to travel in a lone ship with a mutinous crew heading 4,000 miles around the tip of Africa to track down a handful of die-before-surrender pirates and then bring them back their treasure to the governor of New York and his secret backers. So it's pretty fascinating little history. Next, we're going to do this out with knocking everything over. We saw in a book haul the other day, David Howarth, the writer. I've got a volume of his about the Battle of Waterloo. This is about Trafalgar. I don't have a dust jacket for this. It was lost a long time ago. Here are the end papers showing the HMS Victory. Nelson ship. Nelson. So it's New York, Athenaeum, 1969. Nicely illustrated. So it's all about the Battle of Trafalgar. Most famous sea battle maybe of all time, or one of them. One of the top 10 for sure. There's Nelson. Good popular retelling of the story. Subtitled The Nelson Touch. Then on our suspense shelves, bookcase 2, we discussed Alistair MacLean. Here he does not fiction, but a biography of Captain Cook. It's a beautiful volume here. 10 papers. You see I paid $5 for the thing. Pretty good deal. Originally cost $9.95. So. Doubleday and Company Incorporated, Garden City, New York, 1972. Very nicely illustrated. Oh, the story of Captain Cook, and there's Alistair MacLean there. Next, this was a pretty popular book when it came out. Ship of Gold in the Deep Blue Sea. By Gary Kinder. The Atlantic Monthly Press out of New York. And that would have been 1998. This is shows a wrecked steamship out of a newspaper. So in September 1857, the SS Central America, a side-wheel steamer carrying nearly 600 passengers returning from the California Gold Rush, foundered in a hurricane and sank 200 miles off the Carolina coast. Over 400 lives and 21 tons of California gold were lost. It was the worst peacetime disaster at sea in American history, a tragedy that remained lost in legend for over a century. In the 1980s, a young engineer from Ohio set out to do what no one, not even the United States Navy, had been able to do: establish a working presence on the deep ocean floor and open it to science, archaeology, history, medicine, and recovery. The SS Central America became the target of his project. After years of intensive effort, Tommy Thompson and his Columbus America Discovery Group found the Central America in 8,000 feet of water, and in October 1989 they sailed into Norfolk with their recovered treasure: gold coins, bars, nuggets, and dust, plus steamer trunks filled with period clothes, newspapers, books, journals, and even an intact cigar sealed underwater for 130 years. Life magazine called it the greatest treasure ever found. So, exciting, fun book if you're a treasure hunter, if you enjoy that sort of thing. The next one's another one without a dust jacket. I don't even know why this one doesn't have a dust jacket. It's not that old. Benedict Arnold's Navy. Oh, old ticket to a Red Sox game. January 8th, 2011. City of Palm Sparks, so it was a spring training game. Yeah, they were even crazy then, $55. I don't even know who they were playing. Huh. $55 for spring training. So, Benedict Arnold's Navy, the ragtag fleet that lost the Battle of Lake Champlain but won the American Revolution, by James L. Nelson. Now, you'll see quite a few James L. Nelson things. He's a writer I really enjoy. He's a good historian. Popularizer of history. He writes really, really excellent fiction. I particularly like his nautical fiction. There's the title page. So it's McGraw Hill, Camden, Maine. And it's 2006. So, here's some illustrations. Benedict Arnold was an incredible military man. His story is really interesting. He comes down through history as a particular way because he did betray what would eventually be a country. Benedict Arnold was a complex guy. He was probably the best, in my opinion, the best military commander of the American Revolution. I'm not excusing what he did, but the way he was treated by lesser talented military folk and by just totally messed up Congress is crazy. You read about it, and it's tough to read. So that's the first part of the third bookcase, third shelf. And thank you, BookTube.